Welcome to our channel. Today, we're taking a closer look at some of the most controversial figures in American history. In this video, we present the 8 worst presidents of the 1800s. These leaders, through their policies and decisions, left indelible marks on the nation, often for the worse. From failed economic policies to divisive actions that deepened national conflicts, these presidents are often remembered more for their mistakes than their achievements. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most intriguing stories. 8. James Buchanan is often considered one of the worst presidents in American history, primarily due to his actions and inactions in the years leading up to the Civil War. Buchanan's presidency occurred during a period of intense national division over the issue of slavery. He believed that the issue should be decided by individual states and territories rather than the federal government. This stance did little to resolve the growing tensions between the North and South. Buchanan backed the pro-slavery Lecompton Constitution in Kansas, which was widely seen as a fraudulent and undemocratic attempt to force slavery into the territory. As Southern states began to secede following the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, Buchanan maintained that secession was illegal but also argued that the federal government had no power to stop it. This contradictory and passive stance failed to address the growing crisis and allowed the secessionist movement to gain momentum. Buchanan's presidency saw the Panic of 1857, a financial crisis that led to a severe economic recession. While the panic had multiple causes, Buchanan's handling of the crisis was criticized as inadequate and ineffective. 7. We have Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Abraham Lincoln after his assassination. Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act in 1830, which led to the forced relocation of thousands of Native Americans from their ancestral lands in the southeastern United States to territories west of the Mississippi River. This policy resulted in the infamous Trail of Tears, during which thousands of Native Americans died from exposure, disease, and starvation during the arduous journey. Jackson strongly opposed the Second Bank of the United States, which he viewed as a corrupt institution that favored wealthy elites over the common people. His veto of the bank's rec harder and subsequent withdrawal of federal funds led to its collapse. This decision is often criticized for destabilizing the economy and contributing to the Panic of 1837, a severe economic depression that followed his presidency. Jackson implemented the spoils system, appointing loyal supporters and friends to government positions regardless of their qualifications. This practice led to widespread corruption and inefficiency in the federal government. Beyond the Trail of Tears, Jackson's policies towards Native Americans more broadly aimed at the destruction of their cultures and societies. He viewed Native American societies as obstacles to American expansion and prosperity, and his policies reflected a lack of regard for their rights and well-being. 6. John Monroe, the 5th president. Monroe's administration continued the policies of forced removal and displacement of Native American tribes. The Indian Removal Act was enacted after his presidency, but Monroe's policies laid the groundwork for the forced relocations that would later occur under Andrew Jackson. The Panic of 1819, the first major financial crisis in the United States, occurred during Monroe's presidency. It led to widespread economic hardship, bank failures, unemployment, and a general distrust of banking institutions. Monroe's administration struggled to address the crisis effectively, and his policies are often criticized for failing to prevent or mitigate its impact. Despite the Monroe Doctrine, which aimed to deter European intervention in the Americas, Monroe's administration faced diplomatic challenges in enforcing it. The doctrine lacked the military and economic power to back it up, making it more of a policy declaration than a practical deterrent during Monroe's time. While Monroe supported internal improvements, he had reservations about federal funding for such projects, which limited the extent and effectiveness of infrastructure development during his presidency. 5. Franklin Pierce, the 14th President of the United States, is often considered one of the worst presidents due to several significant failures and controversial decisions during his administration from 1853 to 1857. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which Pierce supported and signed into law, allowed the territories of Kansas and Nebraska to decide for themselves whether to allow slavery through popular sovereignty. This effectively repealed the Missouri Compromise, which had prohibited slavery north of the 36 degrees 30 minutes parallel. The act led to violent conflict between pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers in what became known as Bleeding Kansas, significantly escalating tensions between the North and South. Pierce is often criticized for his weak and indecisive leadership. He tended to side with Southern interests, which made him unpopular in the North and led to a lack of coherent national policy. In 1854, the Ostend Manifesto was drafted by American diplomats, suggesting that the United States should acquire Cuba from Spain by any means necessary, including force if Spain refused to sell it. The manifesto was leaked to the public, causing a scandal. Many Northerners saw it as an attempt to expand slave territory, which further damaged Pierce's reputation and increased sectional tensions. Pierce's personal struggles, including the tragic death of his son shortly before his inauguration and his reported alcoholism, affected his ability to govern effectively. 4. John Tyler, the 10th President of the United States, served from 1841 to 1845 and is often considered one of the less effective presidents for several reasons. Tyler became president unexpectedly after the death of President William Henry Harrison, just 1 month into his term. As the first vice president to succeed to the presidency due to the death of the incumbent, Tyler faced challenges establishing his legitimacy. Although Tyler was elected as a Whig, his policies were more in line with those of the Democratic Party, which he originally belonged to. His refusal to support key Whig policies, such as the re-establishment of a national bank, led to a severe rift with the party. Tyler's frequent use of the presidential veto further alienated him from Congress. Tyler's most notable achievement was the annexation of Texas. While this expanded U.S. territory, it was highly controversial and intensified sectional tensions over the expansion of slavery. The annexation contributed to the outbreak of the Mexican-American War and further polarized the nation. Tyler's foreign policy decisions were also contentious. His administration negotiated the Webster-Ashburton Treaty, which resolved some border disputes with Britain, but his efforts to expand U.S. influence in Hawaii and his secretive pursuit of the annexation of Texas were criticized for their lack of transparency and potential to provoke conflict. 3. Millard Fillmore, the 13th President of the United States. Fillmore supported the Fugitive Slave Act, which was part of the Compromise of 1850. This law required that escaped slaves be returned to their owners even if they had fled to free states. It was seen as a betrayal by many in the North who were opposed to slavery and contributed to the growth of the abolitionist movement. Fillmore's presidency is often criticized for its lack of decisive leadership. He was seen as a caretaker president who failed to address major national issues with vigor and vision. While Fillmore was not directly responsible for the judicial outcome, his administration's handling of the Amistad case, where enslaved Africans seized control of a slave ship and sought freedom, was criticized for its legal maneuvering to avoid a definitive stand on slavery. Fillmore was seen as resistant to new political movements and ideas, such as the emerging Republican Party, which opposed the expansion of slavery. His inability to adapt to changing political dynamics contributed to his political failures. 2. Martin Van Buren, the 8th President of the United States, served from 1837 to 1841. While he had a distinguished career before and after his presidency, his time in office is often criticized for several reasons, primarily related to economic difficulties and his handling of key issues. Van Buren took office shortly before the Panic of 1837, a severe financial crisis that led to a major economic depression. While Van Buren did not cause the panic, his response to it was seen as inadequate. He believed in limited government intervention and adhered to the principle of laissez-faire, which many felt was insufficient to address the widespread economic distress. Van Buren proposed and eventually established the independent treasury system, which aimed to separate the federal government's funds from private banks. While this system was intended to stabilize the economy and prevent future panics, it was controversial and did little to alleviate the immediate economic hardships faced by many Americans during his presidency. Van Buren struggled with political divisions within his own Democratic Party and faced strong opposition from the newly formed Whig Party. 1. Zachary Taylor, the 12th President of the United States, served from March 1849 until his death in July 1850. Although his presidency was brief, it was marked by several significant controversies and challenges. Taylor was a staunch opponent of the expansion of slavery but failed to take decisive action to address or mitigate the sectional tensions over the issue. His reluctance to confront the issue of slavery directly left the matter unresolved and exacerbated tensions that would lead to the Civil War. Taylor's opposition to the compromise, particularly his resistance to California's admission as a free state and his push for a more stringent stance against the expansion of slavery, was seen as a failure to navigate the political challenges of the time. Taylor's presidency was cut short by his sudden death after only 16 months in office. His poor health and limited time in office restricted his ability to pursue an effective legislative agenda or to address the major issues facing the nation. Taylor had frequent conflicts with Congress. Taylor's statements and policies on issues like the Mexican-American War and territorial expansion were often inconsistent, which created confusion and hindered his ability to lead effectively. Taylor failed to effectively address territorial disputes in the newly acquired lands from the Mexican-American War. His lack of a clear policy on how these territories should be managed and incorporated into the Union was a significant failure. And there you have it, our list of the 8 worst presidents of the 1800s. Their actions and inactions left lasting impacts on the nation. What do you think? Do you agree with our list? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more historical insights. Thanks for watching.